Now, there are some times we're going to want to take our 3D solid and combine multiple simple things together to make a more complex object. For example, this shape here looks complex, right? Looks kind of complicated, but it's really just a bunch of boxes and a cylinder glued together, and then a hole was cut out of it, a fillet was added to it. Right, so the idea is we look at complicated shapes, we should be thinking about what are the basic shapes that make that up. And we can build just about anything out of simple basic shapes. You could actually build tons of stuff out of these simple primitive shapes. Okay, but there will be times you need to do a little bit of modification to them. And I don't mean clicking the grips and changing the size or going to the properties and adjusting their location or their size. I mean, doing what we were talking about earlier when I said, well, what if you took a piece of sandpaper and you rub the corner here? What would happen to that sharp corner? Right? So there are tools that we're going to talk about that allow you to make changes to your solids after the solids are created. Now, it's really important that before we do this, you find this button up on your 3D Tools tab and you turn it on. This button is called Solid History, and when it's on, it's got that light blue background. Why doesn't AutoCAD have it on all the time is just one of the mysteries of the universe, okay? But what you want to do is you want to have that on, because now any changes we make to these models, we will be able to have a lot of control later on if we want to adjust those changes. So, what kind of changes are we talking about? Well, do you remember how in 2D we had a command called fillet? Put a round corner on things, right? And we had a command called chamfer, and put a bevel on things. Well, these commands are for 2D stuff. See, some things work great in 2D or 3D. We saw how the move command works in 2D or 3D. Copy command works great in 2D or 3D. Right? I can copy all day long. What else works great? Rotate? Maybe not so much. You know, if you try to rotate in 3D, you're only going to be able to rotate on the XY plane, which is fine, but if you want to rotate in one of those other directions, you're out of luck. You'd have to use the rotate gizmo. Okay, trim and extend have no application in 3D. Array, you can make an array of solids. Right? Or one solid becomes lots of solids. So some of these commands have multiple applications, whether in 2D or 3D. Stretch, not so much. Stretch is for lines, right? Mirror would work in 2D or in 3D. You're making a rotated copy, basically, right? And depending on where your mirror line is, you'll get that rotated copy. Offset doesn't work. Offset doesn't work for 3D, only works for 2D. Scale. Now, scale is great. Scale works in 2D or 3D. If I say, hey, make that 0.5 scale, half size, well, now, same box, same solid, just half as big. Right, so we want to be aware that some of the modify tools in 2D work in 3D and others just don't. The one you want to give a lot of attention to and be very careful with is this guy, Explode. So check it out. This is a 3D solid, and you can tell because when you hover over it, it says, hey, that's a 3D solid. And if you look at its properties, it'll tell you it's a 3D solid. If you explode a 3D solid, bad things will happen. Now, I just exploded this 3D solid, and it really doesn't look any different, does it? So what's the difference? Well, the difference is that's no longer a 3D solid. You see, it says that top face there is a region. It's a 3D face. This is a region also. See, what happened is we blew it apart, and now it's made of a bunch of 3D faces. Okay, so I can't think of a single instance when you would want to explode a solid model into surfaces. Just understand if you do, you're back to the drawing board pretty much. It's all over. That model is no longer any use to you, okay? So be kind of careful with the explode command. It does bad things. Okay, erase just erases things. Okay, so fillet and chamfer though, doesn't it make sense that we might want to round the corner off on something or put a bevel on a solid? So if we want to do that, we're not going to use the 2D drawing tools to do that. We're going to go to the 3D tools, and we have a command specifically for working with 3D solids. One's called Fillet Edge and one's called Chamfer Edge. So let's see how these guys work. Fillet Edge. Pick your edge. And then down the bottom, it's going to give you the option to change the radius. So like right now, my radius is gigantic, way too big. How about 0.1? Okay, when I zoom in, I see it's a little preview of what I'm going to get if I hit enter and execute the command. So why don't we try that together? Let's click on Fillet Edge and then pick an edge. When you pick the edge, you should see a preview, and if the preview looks gigantic, it's not going to fill it, So set your radius to something reasonable. 0.05, there we go. Enter again, and now the top of my cylinder has a filleted edge. If I click on Fillet Edge and pick a face, nothing happens. So I've got to click right on the edge. I can pick more than one edge at a time. Enter to get all the edges in one shot. And of course, look at how that filleted versus what if I did this. I'll do Fillet Edge, and I will do all the outside corners first. Sometimes you got to pick it up and move it around to get the back. And then I do a fillet edge on the top here. Right now I'm grabbing all the edges, including the rounded edges, and I'll get a much different result at the end. Alright, I'll get a nice rounded off corner there.